have the NCA opening up purchases of Bitcoin to 650 banks and credit unions. Now, here we're talking about Paraguay. We're talking about uh, what was it? El Salvador. We're talking about
Mexico.
Panama,
Mexico.
Mexico. These are all people who are, just talking about getting involved with the cryptocurrency, with Bitcoin, and being able to invest it. Now we have NCR saying that 650 banks will soon be able to distribute Bitcoin. Um, that's huge news, I feel, for Bitcoin. I feel like this is going to compound on itself in the sense that as soon as society has the ability to access it in such a easy way, everybody knows how to transact with their own bank account versus transact with potentially an application like Coinbase or the entry to barrier is just technology. Banks are going to be allowed to distribute Bitcoin. Why, Jeremy? What are your thoughts on this?
Doesn't doesn't that mean that banks have centralized Bitcoin in a
It's
way?
coming on a world scale. And if it hits this world scale, it's just going to keep on going. More adoption, the more banks are going to be adopting it, more larger institutions are going to be adopting it. It's going to become a very real asset that you'll be able to trade for goods. I don't
Well,
see a bad thing with it at the moment with the adoption of, though it's the adoption of other countries and not like China, United States, or Russia. Like it's more of these countries that are South American and everything like that. I believe this central bank is
st-
is a big proponent, but go for
Josh,
it, Wyatt.
Josh, why don't you mute your microphone so we can't hear you? Because I can't hear anything that Jeremy's saying. No, I mean, like, yeah. See now, Jeremy, please, like, I
Ah, see.
can't hear anything you were
No, what
saying.
I was saying is that once it hits the central bank, once it hits any of the large corporation and investors, it becomes a real player in the game and it hits the world stage. So I don't know. What do you think about it? Why I believe that it's just going to keep growing momentum. Even though China backed out of it, they're still having a lot of momentum with these other countries just
So
adopting it and trying to make it a mainstream currency.
here's an interesting point about this, right? So there are only 2.67 million Bitcoin left to be mined out of the 21 million that were in existence. And it's theorized that it will take about 100 years roughly to finish mining all that Bitcoin. Then that's it. There will never be any more unless somebody changed the code. And as soon as somebody does that, every valid point about Bitcoin, about inflation, flies out the window. Just would deflate all of that. But so let's assume that it ends, right? Well, if imagine if you let your financial systems around the world start to be able to mine this, because we can distribute it. So what if they can be able to mine it or invest in mining? You'd see an influx in capital, and you would see people piling into this. Perhaps we would actually. I think we might see the end of Bitcoin being mined in our lifetime. You know what I mean? Like within the next 50 to 60 years, I think it could happen if you see much more adoption.
You
But
know,
the real interesting thing is this. I agree that you can use it to pay for goods. I mean, you can use it now. California has got 30,000 businesses that take it. Not to mention, there's six crypto or Bitcoin ATMs within a 1 mile radius of where I'm currently sitting in Southern California. So it already exists. But letting the banks buy it, I mean, that allows banks to store it, just like big players to store it. And if big entities just buy up lots of Bitcoin, they become the distributors of it. How does that decentralized? I mean, yeah, you have the blockchain, but we're not talking about the blockchain. We're talking about Bitcoin specifically. Like, how does that coin, how does the behavior just become something that you can use? Banks allow and funds allow you to use it like all other normal capital, which is fine. But if they can be distributed and hold it and store it, you know, there's
so this is where
concentration of
the
power.
the other proponents of other coins comes into play. It's not just Bitcoin that is able to do what Bitcoin does. Ethereum is able to do what Bitcoin does. You have all these other alternative coins that are able to do what Bitcoin does because it is a blockchain system. So once Bitcoin goes down, guess what? They could continue using that currency, sure, and it will be a
So
solidified
we're currently
currency
talking
even
about the
more so because
effectiveness of
every
Bitcoin
single
and how it could
Bitcoin will be
it
able to have
will
a tag on
survive
it,
the long run.
and it'll always
There's
be in
enough
a system.
technology and
Then you go on
cryptocurrencies
to the next currency, and that's
that
where
it
I
can
see it
totally
actually
overtake it
going.
as a
And so it's
technology. It could
the
overtake
equivalent
it
of
as something
saying,
that
hey, Bitcoin
would
is
be
the $100
viable
bill,
in the
Ethereum
long
is the
run.
fifty
Short
dollar
run, we're
bill,
looking at it
and
that everybody's
I
adopting
don't
it.
know,
It has a high
Ripple
price
is
value.
like the $1 bill.
Um,
So
But
I
it's
think
it,
that
but
it
to
could
there's
view
be
it
no
as
like that.
gold,
but there's
definitely
no
a way
like
to see it as a
it's
long
not
term.
it's not
But
the
to
same
view
thing
it
at
as
all
something
because
that
it's not
can
owned by the United States of
potentially
America. A
dip
$50
out due
bill is
to the
50
amount of
United
technology
States dollars.
that is taken
It
over
would
That's a
be a
very
world
and
specific
ability
measure.
currency.
to
But
compete
you
with
It
that
would be
other
a world.
technology. That's
but how could
definitely
you say
something
like
that we're going to be
fifty
seeing in the
dollars
long
is
run.
different per country? So you would have
If
to
you guys are
use like
just
the
joining
US
us,
dollar as the
then
benchmark, right?
jump
So
onto our YouTube. Jeremy
I
and
don't
Wyatt are
I
definitely
agree that it can be used as an
going
asset. If
at
the
it.
banks want to let
They're
people
talking
use it and
about
buy it and
Bitcoin
sell it
and
and trade it. I
how
mean, anybody can get into this game. We're
the
already seeing
banks are even
huge
going to be able to
institutional
use this
adoption.
in the
But
short term, only because of
I don't
True.
see how
what Bitcoin
I
is
mean,
creates
defined
more
that's only
production. I don't see
as
that's
how it
only
allows
because
more
by the
it's
banks.
production.
it's like a
This is something
forex
that's definitely over
currency.
my head, but
It's
if it's something
Ethereum
that
to
you would want to
USD,
even get to know
Ethereum
of,
to
this is
JPY,
something that
Ethereum
I
Right,
keep
because that's
learning
what
to
it
every single
needs to
day.
be. Because
These guys are
otherwise,
great. These guys are amazing.
so you have to pin them
They're
to the
still
dollar,
going at it.
and the
exactly.
Go
problem.
ahead and
So
jump
you
on
can
our
still
YouTube and
have
check
them
it out.
and use them, but it it is using it as like a store of with the amount of fluctuation you have difficulties in how you actually plan to use that money, right? Imagine you had to budget a project and you had to figure out how many Bitcoin it was going to cost in the future. Unless you have contracts to lock all of that in relative to the US dollar, assuming that all stays constant, how can you plan anything? You know what I mean? Like a 6 month, 8 month, 12-month venture, over that time, your funding needs could drastically change with the fluctuation of the market. And once all the coins are mined, the volatility is crazy. There's no stability there, which makes it very difficult. Tesla's having a huge problem with accounting for Bitcoin on its books. It's a huge nightmare trying to continually price
Oh,
and
I bet.
reprice and revalue.
But the thing
So,
is that with blockchain comes better code. With better code comes better coins, and it's just a progression of technology.
but I also have so I agree with that. So I don't like see blockchain and smart contracts. I like cryptocurrency as it exists. I don't think any of these coins are worth anything. I think the blockchain technology and the smart contracts are already being used and do hold significant value going forward. But then when you go down that path, I am concerned that when governments start to create their own central bank tokens, you will be talking about a much bigger government approach to finance because the government will play a much bigger direct role in financing,
Let
which
me ask
could,
you something.
which is scary.
When let's just say, I don't know, Goldman Sachs puts out a coin, or JP Morgan puts out a coin, these banks put out a coin, and
Yeah.
they say, hey, the caveat is we're able to track your transactions. They paint it in a beautiful light. They say, we'll know where your money's at. We'll be able to help with fraud. We can put it on the FDIC and give you $250,000 in insurance.
Well,
Yet
if they
there are
can,
all
I don't know if
the
that's covered.
yeah, I know, but I'm trying to say they're painting this beautiful picture
Right.
in which they're saying they have your back. Do you believe the majority of retail investors or just the majority of people are going to look at that and say, yes, we love being tracked? I don't know. If it was just me, I'd just say, no, I don't really like being tracked on everything that I do and purchase. So
Right.
what do you
But
think what would you go for? Would you go for the JP Morgan crypto or would you go for the Ethereum?
neither. I would stick with the thing that actually makes any of it valuable, which is the US dollar. Because without the US dollar, none of it's worth a damn. None of it's worth anything.
I gave you two choices, Why don't go out of these boundaries that
Well,
I'm
you
trying
can't.
to
But then
paint for you.
that's first of all, that's not America, there, buddy boy. Second
No,
of all,
this isn't a democracy. This
you
is a
don't.
dictatorship. You make your choice, either or.
No,
You only have
I
two
will not. They're
choices.
both garbage choices. I don't have to choose them because the U.S. dollar is still very much a stable currency that is yet to be eradicated. But so like I agree. Don't get me wrong. Like if people want to use it to exchange value, but it's nothing more. It's not creating more value. It like rides the value that already exists like a wave. If anything, it can serve as a representation for large chunks of value by saying one Bitcoin's worth 32,000 US dollars. So you can only move certain, lower amounts of information to account for large amounts of capital. But Bitcoin hasn't created more value, because the value that it derives is in the US dollar, and anything that's created from the production of Bitcoin and the technology, well, why do people do it? Not because they don't build blockchain technology because Bitcoin, there'll be more Bitcoin. They develop blockchain technology so they get paid in US dollars and make profit. So the entire end game is about the profit and creating more production, which means if you continue to improve production and the economy gets bigger and bigger, you need to literally make more money to account for that quantifiable change in production. So the US dollar is still the goal of the game, even with cryptos. The goal of the game is still US dollars. You trade Bitcoin, why? Worth US dollars, and you can make profit.
So let me put a pause there. This is a topic
I was about to just dig into him right now.
Hey, dig in. Hey, dig in.
Yeah,
Go.
Jeremy,
Go. Last comment. Dig in, Jeremy. Dig in.
All right. So what happens when a security in the NYSE, in the stock market, gets bought up, and let's just put an example out there, Berkshire Hathaway. Okay. When they buy the majority of their shares, what happens to the stock price?
It should go up.
It goes up, yes, but it also becomes more stable, less volatility, much less risk. And that is what I see Bitcoin doing in 100 years. When all the Bitcoin gets bought up, there is less risk. It becomes a stable coin, and it's just valued at what it's at.
Right, and that's fine. But the problem is,
I can't hear you, Josh, by the way.
Yeah, if you're talking, Josh, okay.
I still can't hear you.
So I don't think he's talking about us.
Okay.
So but the problem is, like, I agree with you. I agree that once it's all mined, there'll be a finite amount, and in theory, it should stabilize out, because I also find that this is a very finite supply. Eventually in the beginning, I think it'll still be very volatile until people really get over that and they realize, like, it's just another asset that exists. So I agree with you. It'll stabilize, but it doesn't replace the value needed by other fiat currencies and by the dollar. It doesn't create more value. Like, it'll be you can say it might be I don't think it'll ever truly be a store of value, because it's not a stable coin. It's not designed to stay. It's designed to fluctuate. Like, you wouldn't say an investment in Apple is necessarily a store of value. Even though it's much less volatile than Bitcoin, you still wouldn't say, like, if I was going to have a savings account, it would be a good idea for me to put my assets in Apple, Google, the FANG stocks, right? You'd make a diversified portfolio of a percentage of your income. And even that diversified portfolio would have targets and risks, because you still have to measure it. So even stocks and big blue chip companies that are very stable are not stores of value. Bitcoin, which is ridiculously volatile compared to them at the current time, is considered a store of value. And the problem is that even if it is a store of value, that's not necessarily the problem, right? The problem is, what happens when all the value you have stored isn't enough for future production. We realized long ago, many countries did, that we were producing so much stuff. If we just kept everything on a gold standard or on a specific physical resource, there wouldn't be enough of that resource around to support production. So you would cap it off. It would would just take so long to build things, because imagine if you had to pool together $20 billion, but you didn't have as much capital as you do today. You'd have to wait for tons of people in banks to find all the money and pool it all up as collateral, and then you do that one project. But that would force individual components of the sectors in the economy to slow down. If you could produce more money, you could produce every sector. You could produce retail. You could let everything become more and more productive and grow at rapid rates, which is what happened, which is why we have such huge economies, which has been the driver of wealth. If you do it within a stable, such as the Fed's inflation target percentage and supply of money targets, if you stay within rational targets and don't flex it and bend it and do bullshit, that is how stable growth happens over long periods of time, because it takes long periods of time. But I think that
trying to say that the United States is effed because we just keep printing money and not stapled to any sort of gold standard.
But that's every single country, though, because think of it this way, Jimmy, if you didn't take it off the gold standard, would there have been enough money to actually produce the technologies and how valuable they are today to actually get to this point in time?
No, exactly. There has to be productivity. There has to be advancement. But this technology, this conversation could go on for hours.
Yeah, let's save this for a Sunday Fun Day conversation.
That's not the point of Sunday Fun Day, Josh. It's supposed to be fun.
When was the last time we talked about this? It was on a Sunday Fun Day where we discussed the bank's ability to overtake fiat and pretty much its difficulties that it'll run into.
Maybe, but just if I had my final salvo here, I it's funny when you think about that. If we didn't, if we weren't able to produce lots and lots of money at will, we wouldn't have been able to grow and scale markets big enough and fast enough to get to these technologies. And the technologies we're creating are trying to cap the supply of money. But it's funny because we needed to take the cap away to get there in the first place. It's just weird to me. It's just a weird idea that, okay, we've done enough production. Like, we're only going to get more. Like, look at China trying to land on Mars in 2033. We're only going to need more money. The technology is only getting bigger. It doesn't get smaller. We have multi-trillion-dollar companies now. Like, we wouldn't be possible if we didn't have all this extra money. So, because that's why we have targets in the Fed for inflation, not because we realize, oh, we just print all the money. It's because we know we'll have to. So we need to create metrics and confine the system to keep it as orderly as possible. That we realized that long ago. And remember, the United States was the gold standard for a long time. It wasn't until World War II, I think it was after World War II, that we needed to really take it off and move forward. So,
valuable.
That's same problem in the future.
Definitely valuable information as we progress further into the actual use of Bitcoin. It's going to be very interesting as how it's going to survive and mount up against our current financial system.